In 1988, a soft-spoken scientist from the National Aeronautics and Space Administration testified before the U.S. Congress. What he said shocked the world. His research had demonstrated that rising emissions of greenhouse gases from human activities were dramatically increasing the temperature of the global climate and had the potential to make the planet uninhabitable not only for humans, but for many other species. The scientist was Dr. James Hansen, who was widely regarded as the preeminent climate scientist of our time. Dr. Hansen's testimony really marked the beginning of widespread concern about climate change.
What's difficult about the global climate issue is the fact that the climate system is characterized by delayed response and amplifying feedbacks. So the delayed response is because the ocean is 4 kilometers deep, so it doesn't change temperature quickly as we change the forces acting on it. As we change the energy balance of the planet, the temperature will respond, but it takes a long time. It takes decades and even centuries for the ocean to fully respond. And the same is true of the ice sheets. They don't quickly melt as we begin to heat them. So that's part of the problem, the delayed response. And then there are the feedbacks. There are both amplifying feedbacks and diminishing feedbacks, things that make the response greater or smaller. But it turns out that the Earth's climate system is dominated by amplifying feedbacks. And we know that from the history of the Earth. You know, the Earth goes from glacial periods to warm interglacial periods. It oscillates because of very weak forcings that are applied to the system. Specifically, there are changes in the Earth's orbit. The Earth's orbit is perturbed by the large planets, Jupiter and Saturn, and by Venus because it comes quite close to the Earth. And what that does is change the shape of the Earth's orbit. Sometimes it's almost a circle, and other times it becomes more elliptical with eccentricity up to 7%. But in addition, the spin axis of the Earth varies by plus or minus 2 degrees. And when it's tilted more toward the sun, then that tends to melt the ice at high latitudes. And so we go through these glacial and interglacial periods. It's a very weak forcing, this small perturbations of the orbit, but yet because of amplifying feedbacks, the climate response becomes large. The two biggest feedbacks are water vapor. As the planet gets warmer, the atmosphere holds more water vapor. And water vapor is a very strong greenhouse gas, so that makes the warming even larger. And the other thing is, as you melt ice and snow, it exposes a darker surface. That darker surface absorbs more sunlight than the ice and snow. So again, that's an amplifying feedback. And we see from the Earth's history just how strong those feedbacks are. But they take time. They don't instantly happen. That's why we've only felt about half of the warming due to the gases that we've already added to the atmosphere. It's clear that the climate system is characterized by a delayed response and amplifying feedbacks. So that makes it a potentially very dangerous system in which you need to have anticipation if you want to avoid a situation which may run out of your control. The understanding that governments were going to need to anticipate energy requirements actually was stated, I think, very clearly in our first major paper on climate change in 1981 in Science magazine. We wrote a long paper which turned out to be 10 pages in Science. We actually had to submit the paper 4 times for publications. We submitted it 3 times to Science and once to Nature. Finally got it accepted. But the conclusion of that paper already was, well, you cannot burn all the fossil fuels. If you burn all the fossil fuels, you would melt all the ice on the planet. and sea level would go up 70 meters, or more than 200 feet. So we concluded you've got to phase out coal use, and it doesn't make sense to develop unconventional fossil fuels. So we already said that in 1981.
Dr. James Hansen, scientist, activist, and author of Storms of My Grandchildren, The Truth About the Coming Climate Catastrophe and Our Last Chance to Save Humanity. If you want to learn more about climate change and its probable effects, you may want to look at our interviews with Gwynne Dyer, author of Climate Wars, James Hogan, author of Climate Cover-Up, The Crusade to Deny Global Warming, or George Monbiot, the award-winning author of Heat, How to Stop the Planet from Burning. For The Green Interview, I'm Silver Donald Cameron. See you next time.